Okay, yeah, I've begun recording, and welcome to session 14 of our 24-part PDC. We've been moving through our Holmgren 12 principles, and we've arrived at principle 7, design from patterns to detail. And last week we talked about design, how we approach design. We talked about the sequence of the things that we think about, and talked about how design is a process where we do some observational planning, and then we do some analysis, and then we actually begin the design process. And then as we go into it, we're asking ourselves the question, well, is this working? Do I need to make changes? And are we meeting the functions that we intended? So it's a process that feeds back on itself. And I think we said how in permaculture, everything runs on feedback. It's that information coming back that makes the system responsive so it can learn and grow and develop. So today, in session 14, we're going to think more about how do we organize ourselves? How if we had to organize from the bottom up, how would we do that? And we're kind of used to being, many of us in the West especially, and everywhere, but we've been brought up in sort of top-down hierarchical systems, and we're increasingly told what to do and set targets by governments, and everything sort of controlled by tight rules. We're moving into a period of intense, significant change. Climate change is going to change things. We're into energy descent. We're going to have to, I think, build more robust, more local systems to be able to continue meeting our needs. We are seeing situations where whole systems have broken down, where whole countries have failed, or imagine after significant weather events, or after civil unrest and warfare. Think about Iraq, think about Somalia, think about what's happening in Ukraine. We've seen some terrifying climate events, storms and so forth. So let us all be reminded that I think the organization of people and how we build strategies is very much central to this. So it's our design process. And in Bill Mollison's fantastic book, chapter 14 there's so much information in it, we can't cover it in one session, but I'm going to sort of open up, and he's called that chapter Strategies for an Alternative Nation. And I think what he really means by an alternative nation is, organized from the bottom up. Okay, governments and other institutions have a role and shape maybe paths for development, access to resources. But as communities, how do we organize ourselves from the bottom up to ensure that we have putting systems in place that meet our needs? And that's what Bill Mollison starts off with in this chapter 14. So I'm going to take you into that world, and I've created this as a download. It's on the website. Let's go to the website first. Be reminded that oops. Sorry, 1 second. There we go. So just a little reminder that the Sector 39 Academy website, there's a PDC menu there on the right, and you'll see lessons 1 to 14. That's where we are now, and we're on. If you click on 14, that brings you to this page: strategies for an alternative nation, working for change, patterns to detail. So I've thought about contextualizing that in the sort of current modern world, where one schoolgirl, now 20, epitomizes actually an incredibly effective communicator in demanding action on climate change. And that, of course, is Greta Thunberg. At 14 years old, began protesting outside of her school, saying, what's the point of education if the politicians themselves aren't listening to the scientists? And in that way, she has inspired people around the world, especially many young women, children, school kids, and created Friday's school strike for climate movement, which is a global movement. And I had this little picture of our friend Laura in Kampala, who's someone who deeply admires Greta Thunberg and is mirroring her actions in her community. So think about how we connect to change and understand that change always creates new opportunities. And so we have to move in line with these very powerful forces, changing in our world. Or by failing to pay attention to them, we will be unprepared when we experience those impacts. In researching for this session, I found this video, Permaculture Strategies for an Alternative Nation, in which the presenter, I'm sorry, I didn't get his name, is a specialist in disaster prevention. I think he worked for the fire service and talks about bushfires. And he talks about when he did his permaculture design course, actually with Bill Mollison. Bill had asked him if he would map out this sort of bioregional organization strategy. Now, I'm sorry for that. It's a hell of a mouthful. Let's say it more in an easier way. How would we organize ourselves as a community to meet our needs? And can we bring this understanding into our permaculture design? So there's a wonderful presentation by him, and having watched that, I was inspired to write the lecture that I'm going to present to you today. The next resource I've added onto the page, and which you have, if you have time, worth looking at, and this is an interview with another social activist, a guy called Roger Hallam, who is a climate change activist and has founded an organization called Extinction Rebellion, which has had an enormous impact in mobilizing people to, challenge governments, challenge authorities, banks, investors, to, for real action on climate. What's interesting for me, though, is Roger Hallam, I think in the 90s, or even late 80s, became involved in the housing cooperative movement, and showing individuals how they could organize to set up enterprises, cooperatives that exist to meet their needs and can help provide legal structures where you can perhaps borrow money and set up houses and businesses and retail enterprises. So this is an in-depth interview. So Roger Hallam has studied sort of activism and social change, and he's writing a PhD thesis on it. So that takes you to the sort of the other end of the spectrum, really. A couple of other things I just wanted to add. A wonderful, again, short video feeding back about reforestation strategies in Niger, obviously a country in the Sahel, suffering enormously from desertification, lack of forests. And, using simple permaculture techniques, we see wonderful examples of landscape restoration in a very challenging and arid environment. So we're reminded that we can kickstart regeneration, we can kickstart succession from, in almost any circumstances. I just put a link there to the permaculture design course that Caroline and Jane Wargazer are involved in. And I've also just put a link here to a very interesting article about permaculture and traditional knowledge. And this piece was written by a permaculture teacher called Chris Dixon. And Chris was contributed to the PDC that I studied on as a student in 1995. And he has been a mentor and an inspiration to me ever since. So I'm always interested to see his words. So I've added this, and this is all to add depth and context to your understanding of the themes of this week. Another fantastic regenerative agriculture habitat restoration project, this time from Saudi Arabia. If you find this little video interesting about Al Baida, you'll realize that there's a series of them as well, so we can go deeper into that story. This one gives a kind of an overview of it. And again, it's inspirational to know, if you can have that vision, then you can build the steps, build the strategies that's going to get you there from whatever your starting place. And as you'll see in these videos, some people are starting with just about nothing. So we know it's possible, and we know that we can deploy these techniques to rebuild fertility. And I shared a lovely little video earlier today from Kakuma refugee settlement, and it's of the permaculture group there, and they're all enjoying their vegetables that they've grown. So there's today's webpage, and I will obviously add this video to it once we've finished. And then here is our link to today's presentation. Welcome, everybody. I'm just going to So, strategies for an alternative nation. This is the final chapter in the manual, and we haven't by any means covered everything, but I'm going to pick up on some of the other themes. As we go forward, but I just wanted to, I think this is a very good way of thinking. Let's just see what he says. Let's get you into this, because it's interesting. So in the original book, this chapter, Strategies for Alternative Nation, it looks at, political, economic, let's say organizational ideas as to how we might set about organizing ourselves in a way in which operates within the permaculture ethics. Bill said, we need to set about in an orderly, sensible, and cooperative way a system of replacing power-centered politic and political hierarchies with a far more flexible, practical, and information-centered system responsive to research and feedback and with long-term goals of stability. As we need to do this, and we need to do this in an ethical, non-threatening way, so that the transition to a cooperative versus conflicting global society is creative and not destructive. Now, we've had similar thoughts before, and to think about. So the chapter really begins with an ethical basis of an alternative nation, how we avoid conflict, and we do that through earth care.
Steve, the line seems to be dropping.
There's not much I can do other than, shall I recap?
Yes, please, if you could, because it's been, I think, for about a minute and a half.
Okay, I'm very sorry about that. My internet's a bit unstable. How do we go about organizing ourselves? And how do we go about organizing ourselves in a way in which we don't create conflict? People are scared of change. So Bill has said we need to set about in an orderly, sensible and cooperative way a system of replacing power-centered politic and political hierarchies. We need something that's much more flexible, practical and information-centered system, responsive to research and feedback, and with long-term goals of stability. So there's the thing again about this feedback. So think about your design as you do permaculture. You will learn, oh, is it working? Is it not working? How can I improve? Can I learn from other people? What resources, where can I go for information? So think about, we need to set in motion systems that can evolve and can learn. And that means that we can respond to changes and new opportunities. We have to find a peaceful, creative way to transition to a new society. The moment it looks like the big nations are all lining up for a big fight, a big war or something, we have to find another way for transition. And I think the leadership needs to come from the bottom, not the top. I think by in the same way as sort of Greta Thunberg or Roger Hallam or anyone else is trying to say, is we lead by example, we lead by operating within the ethics, and we lead by being inclusive and respectful. And that's how we create change in the world. Big thoughts. So we're going to operate within an ethical framework. There's some lovely quotes in here, but it gets in deep. So yeah, then we get from alternatives to political systems. Bill talks about creating a new United Nations by perhaps redefining what we mean by nations, tribal groups, people with common values, people with common geography, bioregionalism. Are people happy with the idea if we talked about bioregional organization? Can we manage water catchments as a whole? Could we look at a community and think about strategies where we could build mutually supportive systems, and to do that very deliberately? So there's some quite big words in this, but I don't want that to put you off. Bioregional organization. Hey, we need a plan. Permaculture means having a plan, a design. So this is a journey beyond command and control. This is a journey beyond going, Steve's a big chief, you do what I say, and if you don't like it, you get a boot. That's not how we're going to do it. We have to find a better way of organizing ourselves and of being inclusive. And I think that's what this is about. And I think I'm so interested to hear the experience of people in refugee settlements. I know that you're being organized by the various agencies within it, but also what freedom do you have to self-organize? And I think Stella in your studies as well, and well, anyone else really, is these are key ideas. These are really, really key ideas. I found it very interesting researching this today, and I hope I can bring it to life for you. So there's someone holding a compass, and that's almost like, you know, having your own navigational system, using your own tools and instincts to find your journey, to find where you're going. Our society is guilty of giving us the wrong information. Here in the West, we're pushed into eating food that we know is not healthy for us. You know, candy bars and processed meats and hamburgers. We know that they're bad for us, but they're advertised on television all the time. It's almost like we're being given the wrong information. So I think there is an element of finding your own compass, your own steering mechanism. And I think the permaculture ethics give you that. And then that bring you into the idea of design as a process. Okay. So this is how we organize. The images of Paul Agola's classroom there in Homer Bay. And I remember him saying he has about 40 people on his current PDC. And Paul started his, getting an unstable message again. Paul started his training center in, I think, 2017. And he's deliberately invited people from surrounding villages to come and get training, so that slowly the ideas about permaculture are permeating into the wider community. What the Bill Mollison says to us is there's an ideal size of a functioning community, and it needs to not be too small, because we don't have enough manpower, enough skills or knowledge or experience, maybe. And we don't want it to be too big, because then we don't know everyone, and there's danger of other problems coming into the system. So Bill said, if we're trying to organize ourselves in a sort of cooperative neighborhood way, the ideal number is somewhere between 40 and 600. And once you get to 40, you've got enough people to sustain the momentum of the group and to have a wide enough skill set and experience set and connections. When you get beyond 600, you don't know everyone's name. And it becomes less personal, and the interpersonal ties aren't as strong. And then there's then problems that come from that, of, you know, whether it might be, I don't know, dishonesty or not reporting back correct information, or you can easily think about how social systems might break down if trust or communication is eroded. So, yeah. So what happens if we get to 600 and there's still more people coming is you form another group. The groups can still overlap, they can still have relationships with each other. We're all about mutual support, but let's not build systems that are beyond human scale capacity. These are the ideas of the book. You can translate this into your own life experience and think about what this means to you. But I think it's really good to have a framework. So let's say So the diversity of talent, accountability, and personal connection. We can feel that we're part of a cooperative neighborhood. And once we begin to establish that, we can then begin to organize ourselves. Okay, so how would we go about that? What would our strategy be? Well, we need to identify our primary focus. Like, why are we doing this? And so it might be about an individual household. It might be about a small community. It might be about a bioregional level. But it's the focus of our attention. So if you can imagine a spoke, a wheel with a hub and spokes around it, what's our hub? What's our focus? We're going to establish a primary group. And that primary group is going to hold the overview, and it's suggested that we look at then creating support groups for each key function. So to remember, I've talked already about how in permaculture we design to fulfill function, and we support key functions with multiple elements. So we are absolutely explicit about what the functions of our design are. And let's write them down, and let's discuss and experience about how well we think we're moving towards those. So there's a rule of three, troika here, is in each group we want 1, 2, or 3 members, and then once we've populated one group, we can then begin to look at each then function in priority. And individuals can be active in more than one support group. Okay, so let's say we have an overall objective as a community, whether we're a refugee community or a rural community or a dispersed community. So Bill's broken it down into 9 headings, and there's an order to it, because I think that there's always a sense of priority. So this is permaculture design. We're interested in food. So our first area that we're going to be considering is to establish a food support group. And that food support group, what do you think might go on within that food support group? Ask yourself the question, what kind of things might they be discussing and prioritizing? Okay. We also, part of any kind of human habitation involves building. There's all sorts of materials, skills, maintenance, financing, design issues around buildings. And if we're going to take a greater degree of control and responsibility for our own community, we'll need to bring together people who have skills in those areas. And those people then can help organize the community to effectively maintain, service, improve, create new buildings. Okay, so these first 2 around, obviously we all need food. So where's that going to come from? Maybe we look to the World Food Programme, maybe we look to wild food, but in time we need to build strategies that create systems that feed us. In the same way as we've invested a lot of resources and energy in our buildings. Can we make them more effective? Can we take more responsibility? The next area is social support. We need to create an inclusive society. We need to have strategies in place so that people can join in and people can be included. And some communities are better than others at doing this. And it's good to have a group of people, 1, 2, or 3 people, whose primary responsibility is to make sure that that function happens. Livelihood support. We need more than just food. We need money. We need trade. As a community, what can we do to help livelihood? Health, obviously, is absolutely key. Community and security. Another observation of Bill Mollison is that with a cooperative community group of 600 people, we can have a strong sense of community and of security by having a people scale, human scale society. We can take responsibility for our assets and club together if we have to face challenges. As the system gets too big and gets too impersonal, it gets harder to maintain that. We need a good flow of information, and we need knowledge, and we need to gather the story of what we're doing, and be able to share that with other people, and have opportunities to learn and improve. Transport support. We'll look at that briefly, and I thought the ninth area. The ninth function that we should be thinking about is future trends and potential threats. And as I say, it was interesting that the gentleman whose lecture I was inspired by earlier today was someone who's in disaster management. I think he was a fire officer, and he spent a lot of time thinking about how these functions ultimately need to be woven into society. He also made the observation that, again, especially in the West, we're very resistant to change, and we probably won't change our ways until the system starts to break. So, it's good to begin to think about future trends and potential threats. Where are they going to come from, and where are we going to see the changes coming from? And I can say already is climate threats and climate change is forcing up the cost of food, but the price of oil is really also changing the global economy, because we've got climate change, we've got peak oil, there's warfare around these resources. Think about how you might be exposed to a massive price jump in the price of fuel. If you're pumping water for irrigation, if you're traveling a long way for work or to distribute your goods and services, your business model might be compromised. So let's think very deeply about the sort of real threats and challenges that we're facing and which are coming, because we know they're coming. Okay, so each one of these 9 things then breaks down into a whole bunch of subcategories, and food's an important one, and so there's actually 12 subcategories to think about how we plan to make sure that we have the resources to build food systems. And Gerald and Stella, I thought when I was going through this earlier, I thought how this is really interesting to think about how we might organize our thoughts, to think about the hospital project, and also to help everyone, but maybe in a very real way. We'll be working with these ideas. So the resource base that we need to support food growing systems is we need to have strategies in place. We need to build plant nurseries. We need to have strategies for propagation. The easiest thing to do is to start propagating the plants which are going to help build the ecosystem that you're going to grow your plants in. You're going to grow your precious vegetables in. Shade trees, nitrogen fixing trees, wind shelter trees, living hedges to control animals and wild animals. We're going to have to build systems that create the resources that we're going to need to build our growing system, our productive system. What might we need to put in our nursery? What kind of plants do we want to propagate? At what scale? Do we have the skills to do that? How would we go about acquiring those skills? What other elements do we need? On we go. So part 2, number 2, Yeah, the other elements we need for propagating plants, like, inoculants, mycorrhizal fungi. We need compost systems, biochar. We need to create fertile, clean soils that we can propagate our plants in. We can develop plant collections, but botanical gardens, and of course aquatic plants. We haven't talked about aquaculture yet, but when you do farming in water, you have systems that are many more times productive. So think about, as you're planning and designing your nursery and propagation, to see that the site, any demonstration site that you're building, is going to contain plants that you will continue to propagate from, so that you can scale up your operation or have surplus to trade and to give away. We need to establish a support group of 1, 2, or 3 people who are actively researching into both horticulture and pastoral systems. There's no upper limit to knowledge. There's no upper limit to learning. There's no upper limit to the diversity that we can bring into our projects. Start with what you know and build on it. And you can imagine how, as your project develops, you can bring people into these support groups and start to develop that function. So can we extend our sourcing of seeds? Can we learn about seed saving? Perhaps we can do seed swapping and exchanges with other groups and neighbors. Let's have a strategy plan, support plan about seed sources and seed swapping, and informing people about that. And think about how, when we talked about having 40 people in a group, think about how we can then utilize the knowledge, skills, and experience of these different individuals. So seed sources and exchanges, that probably means vegetable seeds, hybridized seeds, and the kind of seeds we might buy. And then there's also the native species and reserves and nurseries of native species. There's many fast-growing nitrogen-fixing plants out there, for example, that are in the wild. We can capture them, we can bring their seeds in, we can promote them, we can have reserves and collections of these plants, so we've always got somewhere to go to propagate from. As we do this, we begin to found demonstration farms and gardens and begin to offer teaching and mentoring to the people that are engaged, people who will be drawn towards what you're doing. So we have a kind of a maxim, a thing that we use to summarize our teaching method at Sector 39, and we say demonstrate, educate, replicate. So in applying these ideas and techniques, you create, whatever you're doing becomes a demonstration site, a real living demonstration site that you are working with, or your community is working with and learning from. And then people will come to you and say, well, why are you doing that? And what's that like there? And you've done that wrong. Or, conversations will come. These are opportunities to teach and learn and mentor. And mentoring means supporting each other to learn. We can't all be experts in every subject. I'm certainly not. And I look for guidance and support from the people around me. And all of us can move in our role from being a teacher, a mentor, and a student. And sometimes we're kind of all three at the same time. So this was the approach that we used in the refugee settlements in northern Uganda in 2018, and it worked very well as a process. Within your food support team, you need to have a group, individual, 1, 2, or 3 people who are thinking about what resources out there are being offered by the government. There's incentives, there's schemes. You want to choose to opt into the ones that suit your needs, not the thing that the government's trying to push onto you, but ask yourself, does it fit our plan? Does it sit within our ethics? And if it does, can we go out and access those resources? But there's a real game of tail chasing going on, almost, of chasing after funding, because it's there. And that's not really permaculture thinking. But at the same time, if there is help there for you, you need to grab it and use it on your own terms to your own objectives. So as much as there might be government resources out there, there might be voluntary agencies, NGOs, other charitable bodies. Maybe they have, you want to find ones obviously that have the same objectives that you might have. We had an example here, plant protection. So let's say we're interested in medicinal plants, in traditional native species. There might be an NGO that can help us with that. There might be a university department that's researching into that. It's worth looking outside of your community to see what else other help might be there. Within our resource set, we're going to need some skills. We're going to need some people who have a depth of knowledge that could share it. We can't all be, I've already said this, we're not all specialists in every area. We're going to need botanists and horticulturalists, soil scientists. We need access to information, again, so we can learn and develop and we can make sure that we are well informed in terms of how we're proceeding. So we start off from the self-help, propagating plants, local resources. As we scale up, we might want help. We might want to bring in contractors, consultants, and employ specialists to help us as the scale of our projects develop, and we need to have more detailed information. An awareness of relevant local species for food, medicine, and resources. Yeah, I like your comment, Caroline. I think it's seeing it that's the thing that's most powerful for people. And then once they've seen it, they start asking those fundamental questions, and then you can bring them into that mindset. So this is like this drilling down. So I've said, of these, there's 9 areas. And so we just looked at, first one is food, and look, there's a whole bunch of, whatever it was, 24 different things. So think about how we might move through these different 9 areas and how we might prioritize them according to our needs. And so now we've just gone through a breakdown of, we've got 12 areas there that we need to think about in terms of supporting and developing food systems. This is Then the next step of supporting food systems is animal resources. We've just talked about plants so far. As we grow plants, we start to have the potential for fodder, and bringing animals into the systems means that we can now begin to cycle nutrients, and through the manure build soil and stimulate plants to grow, and add layers of productivity and diversity to our growing system. So our first consideration then might be, we're going to need some healthy animals that we can breed from, to be our stud animals, and we could create a propagation center. Now, when we talk about animal resources, everybody probably thinks of cows and goats and sheep, maybe, and the larger animals. And of course, they're an important part of our productive systems. But Bill reminds us to embrace diversity. And he says within our animal resources, we need to build up species collections. And in that, he said, worms, invertebrates. Think of the biology of the soil and what it would take to build that trophic pyramid that can support higher up animals. So the rule in permaculture is to start small and to start perhaps with, a few chickens, a few geese, or I don't know what, a worm farm, and to value the okay, that's mentioned. Okay, so we're going to need to breed and multiply our animals once we've got enough fodder in our system to support them. We're reminded to diversify and to start from the bottom with small things and to build up. Also, as on land, so in water, think about fish breeders, aquatic species, aquatic systems. And let's understand and value useful native species collections. We want to value all of the components and bring them together into productivity. Demonstration farms again, especially showing interesting techniques. I don't know, free ranging systems, bee cultivation, again, with workshops and teaching. So people can come in, be inspired and learn. Again, similar points to previously, there are government resources out there to help you. You can look at voluntary agencies and NGOs and charities also. You're going to need skilled people. At some point, you come to challenges with health, long-term management, breeding, choice of breeds, the details. So we can have a support group that is looking out for new skills to inform our animal systems. And again, as we scale up, we might need to access contractors and other people to help us. But again, think about how that might be a process. And the final function under animals is publications, knowledge, information. How do we continually educate ourselves? How do we educate who's going to do that role after you? We need some strategy for passing on the knowledge that we have accumulated. All of this is under food. So when you grow food and you start developing productivity, you end up with a surplus and you can bring in animals. Animals can help add layers of productivity to your system, and they can contribute to it in many ways. Nutrient cycling. They can also contribute to your integrated pest management. Because when you start growing fields of nice, juicy looking crops, there's an interest in that, isn't there? An income, potential organisms that may become pests if you allow them to predominate. So we've talked about IPM. It's always good to revise. Integrated pest management is how we control pests in our productive systems without using toxic chemicals and by using the fact that nature is self-regulating, the fact that elements in systems are connected, and if we promote the local predator species, that will help control organisms that might otherwise become pests. As Bill Mollison once said, you don't have too many grasshoppers, you just don't have enough turkeys. So understand and promote predator species. And that means providing habitat for them, not cultivating every part of your land, allowing a bit of zone 5 wilderness, a bit of zone 4 tree crops, so that and understand the needs of those predator species that are going to help regulate the populations of other insects in your productive systems. Step 2, can we think of safe biological treatments? We can use traps and barriers. Just using a fleece or a net, a physical barrier, is always an effective way of of achieving that effect. You need to build up information resources on integrated pest management. You need to educate yourself and the people around you, and especially in your growing teams, so they understand what the strategy is and how it goes about, how it works. Because you might have someone carefully leaving things for wildlife and then someone else coming along tidying it all up, thinking that they're contributing because they don't understand the process. You need a pest management strategy on your stored grains and seeds, and there needs to be someone who's responsible for making sure that happens and for promoting that information. Yep, you need references and libraries, and so the final one, checklist of common pests. Actually, that almost is what it begins with. Is IPM begins with observation and really carefully looking at your plants. If you see eggs or insects attack, you need to understand, identify what it is, and if you have common pests, that you could quickly build up a little list, little library of information about them, so that we can identify what's going on as quickly as we can. But we're also reminded that healthy plants can resist pest attack, and the healthier our soils are, the healthier our plants will be. So there is very much a relationship between all of these different things. So our IPM strategy comes in place, but as our soil building, soil fertility strategies start to pay off, then the pest problem can go down. It's stressed, weak plants that get attacked first. So, greetings to Simon. We're talking about support systems and how, as groups, we might go about organizing ourselves, and thinking about sort of more like bottom-up organization to make sure that we're meeting our own needs with a sense of priority and strategy. And each one of these areas needs looking at, and you need a group in place of 1, 2, or 3 people, it's just suggested, that think about food support, that think about building support, that think about social support, livelihood support, so on. Each one of these is a key function of a successful bioregional society, a cooperative community. We talked about groups of people between 40 and 600 being a human scale society. And once we've organized groups at that scale, we can have subsequent groups. So we're looking at food support systems, number one. And we talked about the planned resources for plants and growing. We talked about how the resources we might need for supporting animals. And now we've thought a little bit about integrated pest management. There's going to be a whole area to think about as our land becomes productive. How are we going to capture that food? How are we going to process it and preserve it? And there's a knowledge set and skill set to go with that, which I skipped that one for some reason. As we move into surplus, once we have producing more than just what we need, we can begin to think about processing food preservation. Then we have an opportunity to sell surplus into local markets. We can. Bill Mollison has suggested we all need to aim to become producers. We can't just be consumers. Again, as the world becomes more developed, many more of us work in soft services sectors, information processing. We don't really produce anything, we just process things. I think we need to be producers as well, on whatever scale. And if we get good at producing something and we have a surplus, we can bring it to market. We can think about setting up a delivery round to local customers. We might get to the point where we're doing wholesale or export of our products. It's very interesting to think about setting up urban to rural or rural to urban co-op systems. A thought to you, Stella, if in an urban setting there in Kampala, you can see the food markets going on around you there. Could we build a relationship with a supplier from outside of town and have a relationship there where we could sell some of our produce and generate some cash? And we could build a relationship between a producer and have a retail cooperative in a part of an urban community. We might think about retail outlets or roadside sales. We could, and then depending on the scale that you're operating at, there's always advice and services out there, and in development, the world of development, people want to create jobs and money and wages. There's advice out there about that kind of thing, and if you are bringing things to market, there's an awful lot to know about packaging, branding, marketing, how you present your goods in a way in which they last, which meet requirements. Many considerations that optimize it. Can we do value adding? And also not to forget that on whatever scale, if we're producing something, we can use it for barter and exchange. And there's no tax on barter and exchange. We can participate in the informal economy. We can make our cut greens and onions and tomatoes and avocados, a part of a local currency. So think about how, as we develop our food systems, we start thinking about the plants, building the system itself. What stage might we start introducing small livestock in small groups? How can we use that livestock as well as part of our IPM strategy? As we start to produce, how are we going to preserve it and process that food? And then if we get to the point where we have a surplus to sell, how are we going to bring that to market? Someone's going to have to think about that. And as we develop the size of our group, we can delegate responsibility to 1, 2, or 3 people to support each one of these key functions. And you can drill down much. There's whatever thing you want to click on, there's going to be more layers of detail to go into. And that's why I thought about this fits within the patterns to detail model that we're talking about. Is how do we do food support? Well, that's the pattern. That's the overarching thing. Click on that and we get our 12 different considerations, and we might click on each one of those, and then that could break down into more and more detail. So think this is how we look at a really big problem, break it down into manageable chunks, and then we go forward and we create change in a way that works. So as we move into our food production systems, we now need to create support services for those food production systems. We need to be testing our soils over time for quality, content. Are we building soils? Are we maintaining the pH and the humus, the fertility? We can look at it obviously from a testing side of quality and a biological analysis, because our number one long-term goal in permaculture food systems is to build soil. It's to retain more water. Are we doing it? So the next one: water supply, services, dams, catchments, infiltration, swales, berms. That we need to be observing or constantly developing and improving those systems. Surface areas, support services. fences, trellises, cattle grids, gates, surfaces we want to grow up, things we're going to use to zone the movement of animals, facilitate the movement of people. We need a set of strategies around natural fertilizers, around mulch materials, soil amendments. Bill Morrison talks about maybe you need mineral additions. If we do testing of the soils, and the more information that we get, the more we understand perhaps how we might need to make amendments and changes to the soil to improve it. Within our food production support services, we need a group of people who are concerned with farm machinery, garden and domestic tool supply, maintaining tools, sharpening tools, learning how to use them properly, storing them, cleaning them, maintaining them. This is something that a group of people need, somebody named person or persons needs to be responsible for, and they can be constantly learning more about and developing a specialism within that area. All right, we might need input to help us plan our land. We might need at some point to go outside and bring in more information. And we need someone thinking about the long-term planning of the land and being ready to learn and to develop ideas. Other infrastructure things you might need. We've got a greenhouse, a shade house. I thought about propagation areas. I thought about windbreaks, natural barriers for wild animals. We need to have processes in place that provide support services to our food production. Okay, so as you can see how, look, it breaks down. I think it's a really interesting model. It's methodical, and we've just looked at food support systems so far, but you can see how it's very comprehensive, and it gives us a sense of priority, and it gives us a sense of like a checklist to make sure we haven't got any big blind spots. I thought this was really nice, and then takes us to shelter and buildings in the second one, which we'll go into in a minute. I'm just checking the time. We have, is it an hour and a quarter, Gerald? I think so.
Yes, it is.
Maybe we should have let's allow ourselves a 6-minute break.
Yeah, sure. Unless we have any.
Some questions first. So I did actually want to have some questions. I'd love to have some feedback. I feel I just talked a lot. So your initial thoughts, please, Gerald. I'm very interested to.
Somehow blown away. This is, as you said, methodical and sequential in sorts, but then it really makes a lot of sense. It puts things together. It is sort of a guilty checker, because some of these things I personally realized in some of the projects, probably we were not following the right sequence, which obviously is not to scare off the team or anyone, but then however much it's not, we are looking at a cycle which is not so sequential, but some things really would make more design sense in a specific order. Like when he mentioned that until you have sufficiency at a human level, it wouldn't be advisable probably to introduce animals that are high on fodder. But then it also takes us back to the small and slow solutions. So it's a good area to kickstart thinking, or to get really, really thinking. I'll go back and have to run through this. As Steve said, this is probably a new section into into our lectures or into our trainings. Any questions? I think we've lost Caroline. No, not Caroline. Peter. Any questions or contributions, Stella, Shinaz, Caroline, Nicholas?
Well, on the side, I'm actually enjoying the lecture, and it's really something very nice and interesting to get it blended in our work. I like it and I'm following it up. Thank you.
Stella. All right, Steve, unless you have anything to add in, let's have the 6 minutes and be back at, let's do them 7 and be back at 5 past the hour.
Okay, right. So 5-2, did you say?
No, 5. Oh, okay. Yeah, sure.
7 minutes.
5-2.
Okay, see you in 7 minutes.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah. Welcome back, Simon. I guess the network had picked you up. We've been having a brief break, but we're back just as you logged in.
Hi, everybody there.
Yeah, sure. And as we go on, I guess we'll keep recapping. Yes.
I'm shocked the time we started the meeting and the time I logged in, we are already in the break.
Oh.
Yes, so we're very sorry. So the time changes in the UK. I didn't effectively inform everyone. The time changes by 1 hour as we enter the summer. And so that is why. So we're actually now, it begins at an hour earlier. So it's 6:30 East African time that we begin, and that will remain for the rest of the course. So I apologize.
It's okay now, but it's okay. I've understood now.
Okay, good. Yeah. So that was my fault, but anyway, there we go. So it's a crazy system. So welcome back.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
Yeah. I wanted to mention 2 things, actually about 3 things. This session seemed to be sort of integrative because it hinted on most of the crucial things we always talk about. One, the IPM, and it's good that Simon is back. I know he's a major fan of this. And then also the anthropic levels as part of the IPM. Then secondary, there is something I usually refer to. I don't know if I picked it from you, Steve, which is the viability levels or the viability stages. At which point would you really go into source for a resource, or at what point do you get to buying something, especially if you're not using it day to day? So that is really interesting. Over to you, Steve.
Okay, thank you, Gerald. It's great to have your input. And yes, so Simon, the question we're asking ourselves is, how could we organize ourselves as a community? Should we be required to? And perhaps if we can organize ourselves on a kind of a local level, can I say bio-regional level, we could maybe come up with much more functional designs. And we don't know what stresses and challenges are happening in the outside world. So the more that we can be resourceful and self-organized contributes enormously to how we can operate. Now I'm thinking about you guys there in Teso. You've created TAPA and other bioregional support groups for permaculture. So you're doing it. You're doing it. So this lecture adds depth and detail to the processes, and it's like a checklist. And I just remind you that this resource is on the website. You can download the PDF. It's not a big file, and you're welcome to obviously study it in your own time or come back and see the video. So we talked about organizing ourselves to create an effective cooperative neighborhood. We need at least 40 people because there's a whole bunch of things to think about. And we could keep involving people in that process, because as we do it, we will attract people.
Yeah, that is nice. But in, yes?
Yes, please tell us some more.
I was with a view that the organization of members on how we can promote and cooperate on the permaculture skills and designs and so forth, whereby members have agreed upon that they will take on the activity at this very summer, but they have got some challenge where financially they have got some challenge whereby they need to rearrange. And the coordinator, we are trying to see how we can reorganize them back such that the process of permaculture should be spread all over the communities there. So.
Yes.
And apparently, as rains have just entered in, these people are seriously with their cultural methods of farming.
So you're experiencing some challenges there as the size of the group is growing, is what I'm hearing. And I think that this is part of what we're exploring in this lecture. So that's an interesting comment. Thank you. Okay.
Oh, okay. Yes, Simon, thanks. We lost Steve briefly, but he's getting back on. Steve, you seem to be muted.
It's okay. We shall reconnect to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just thanking you for your comment, Simon, and I was just summarizing. Are you saying as your group has developed, it's been hard to maintain a sort of commonality, a common view?
Yes. Some are doing it, but the 5 groups in Tapa and the 2 groups that are coming up with the APAD, these people are also practicing the permaculture skills and designs, whereby we are now arranging community patches of seeds where we need to put them down. And apparently, I know by tomorrow I will be sending you the video of the compost manure that we have made it for the permaculture design things and everything that we have organized in APAD and TAPA at large. Except only now when these small rains have just started in for us here in eastern region of Uganda and Uganda at large, people are busy with traditional aspect of planting granates, those other small crops,
Yes.
as well as we are trying to introduce them on horticultural aspect of permaculture to supplement on food stuffs to improve on their health and their lives, as well as to try to capture the market and to impact the skills to those other local communities whereby they don't know how basically permaculture is being used. And we are trying to tell them how nature can help them more better than the way they have been knowing it. And apparently, as we are talking, we have got some 5-6 jerrycans of traditional pesticides that we have made from Tapa and Apad at large. So those are the chemicals we are going to use traditionally. We are going to use them. So
Mm-hmm.
I and the team from Debra, we are trying to see that we are polishing people out of that knowledge of using those toxins that spoil our soil and the rest. Yes. And I logged in when you were talking of the integrated pest management, and those are some of the pesticides that we have developed, as well as liquid manure, compost manure, and the rest. We have already made them. So we are only trying to communally contribute the funds that we can that we can use for the purchase of the seeds, and then we shall capture that sharing, and then we forward it to you and issue on feedback on what we discuss each and every time, where they say they understood each and everything that you speak and that you lecture to us, and they are so happy that you are impacting them more skills and more skills that they are going to put into practice. They are not sitting, except only that they are only lacking some few materials that they
Sure.
need from you to assist them majorly on the tools to be used at their small kitchen gardens, mandala gardens, what is things like forky hose, hand spoon, hand fork. Yeah, so those are the things we are really lacking, and they are crying and they are telling me through chairman of a PAD who is here with me also, and other members. They are saying that now how are we going to make things run smoothly, because we are inadequate of capital.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So on the issue that you have been talking right now on the food processing and the shelter and so forth, well, as here in the eastern region, we have got a mechanism whereby we have built the granaries for sheltering of our water, of our produce after the removal of it from the garden, after harvest. So I'm trying to sensitize and to tell them the post-harvest handling processes before they go on to the marketing of their products, whereby I told them of the value addition to the commodity, the packaging of the commodity, and then the where to market it from, and how will you market it, and to who will you deliver it, and how are you to care your customers, and through which shelter are you using to make your people access and get the resource and the knowledge. Right now we are selling skuma wiki. That is what we have produced so far right now. From that time up now, we have got skuma wiki, whereby they are happy that they are generating at least little capital that we want to divert.
That's
Thanks,
fantastic.
Simon.
That's really fantastic, Simon. And you touched on some very pertinent points. And also, you're following, you're understanding this very well. I can see you're exactly going through these processes. And I think all we're trying to do is to do it more consciously, more deliberately, and more effectively, and to be able to communicate to the people around us. So, Bill is suggesting we think of 9 areas that we set support systems in. First one being food, buildings, social, livelihood, health, community security, information, transport, and to also think about future trends and potential threats. We'd already gone through the food support, and we noticed there were 12 areas there. You touched on some of those actually, Simon. That was really interesting. We've got our growing resources, our animal resources, integrated pest management, processing and food preservation, bringing foods to market, setting up support services so that our food production grows and develops. We learn about our soils, we develop our techniques, our specialism, and we think about how we're going to share that information and record what we're doing. The second area we're encouraged to think about is shelter and buildings. And Bill breaks this down into 3 areas. What are we going to make our buildings out of? Construction materials. Buildings consume energy, and they need energy to maintain them, to cooking, heating, cooling. And wherever we have people gathered in a building, there's going to be a throughput of waste and materials that we need to build into cycles. So let's break these 3 headings down. We can think about what we're building our materials out of. Are we growing timber as a local suppliers? As a community, could we come together to have community controlled plantations? If we can grow the resources that we need to build our homes, that makes it accessible. Maybe we're in an area where there's stone or gravel, earth materials. In Africa, we build a lot out of rammed earth and clay and cob systems, adobe. What's available? What materials are available locally? What skills are available locally? How can we combine these together? We're going to have to think about plumbing, pipes, drainage, bricks and blocks. Are we making them? Do we sourcing them locally? There's different strategies for making them. All of these things need looking into. We might need floors or tiled surfaces, furniture, fittings. We need to have tools, and we need to maintain those tools, keep them sharp, keep them functioning. And I guess we need all kinds of other things, glues and bonds to stick things together. Can we generate materials locally? What is locally available? And what strategies can we put in place to maintain the buildings that we're making? So we had 3 things to think about: construction materials, energy systems, waste, and cycling. So it's interesting, in energy systems, the first thing that Bill says is look for appliances that are for efficiency, for insulation, for conservation. We don't want to buy we don't want to put in place things that we then can't afford to run, that consume more energy, that we can afford to have. Are we going to have a hot water system? Can we use solar? What's the appropriate heating and cooling for the region that we're in? We looked at some approaches for buildings in the energy lecture. Are there opportunities for power generation? Can we have a solar panel on the roof? As a community, can we design and support and build a lot of knowledge for building low energy housing? Do we have a community strategy or teams of people that can do that? So what sources of information do we have? And are there, how much can we do ourselves within the community, and how much can we bring in reliable contractors and builders? So we can think about the construction, energy, and wastes and cycling. What's our what's our strategy for sewage? Are we just going to build a long drop and try and make it go away? Are we going to compost it? Are we going to have a water closet, a water flushing system? I always think first choice, dry composting system. It's a waste of water. If you put nutrients in water, it then becomes mobile and harder to manage. But you need a system, and you need to have thought about that and how you're going to manage it. Let's separate sewage, or black water, shall we say, from grey water, from the water that comes from washing clothes and bathing and children and food and stuff like that. How can we harvest that? Do we need to treat it? And how are we going to use it? We can easily set up systems that can clean grey water and direct it into our growing systems. Anything that has once lived and is organic can be composted. We could build a range of composting systems for different kinds of things. You might have a composting system for woody waste that takes a little bit longer to break down, or you might pyrolyze that and make biochar from it. You might have a compost system for food waste. You might have a compost system for the weeds and plant waste from your gardens. You might have slightly different strategies for different things. Here in my little cooperative where I live, we have cats, and sometimes we have cat litter. So we collect pine needles for the cats to use as a toilet, and we have a special composting area just for the animal manure, so it doesn't mix into our food systems. And we have another composter where we put all of our cardboard and paper waste and packaging waste, which in the West, there's quite a lot of that. And I see that, well, it's carbon. And so what we do is add small amounts of food waste to that, and it fills up with worms, with red compost worms. So that's another composting system I have. And then I have one at my garden where I compost my weeds and so forth. And then at the farm, we have another system where we're composting animal manures to make compost teas. So there's a lot of different things to think about, and there's always opportunities around converting vegetable and animal wastes into high value things like compost and compost tea. And then you've got solid waste disposal, those non-recyclables, the plastics. I see it all the time in rural Africa. Plastic bottles go out into the villages and there's nowhere for them to go. So they either get left on the ground or people gather them together and burn them. And burning plastic is really toxic. It's not a good thing to do, but I'm not quite sure what else you can do if there isn't refuse collection, other than try and not buy the plastic in the first place. Can we try and design out a lot of rubbish out of our systems? Be aware these things become toxic and they build up over time. So these are very, very important set of strategies to have in place around our buildings, to think about construction, energy systems, waste and cycling. Oh gosh, it goes on. So we've got 9 areas of concern. The next ones are in not so much depth, but we need support systems for livelihoods. Community financing and recycling. Livelihood support systems. So Simon, you said, I've so many people have said this to me today. Please, can you help us? I need money for seeds. Please, can you help us? I need money for tools. Please, can you help us? I need money for a wheelbarrow. Please, can you help us? I need XYZ. How do we do that? Can we establish local finance funds, saving and lending? If we buy tools, we invest in plants, hopefully we can create yields from that, and then we can return some of that money back to the community. There's things like credit unions, saving and loans clubs, Yes, there's the GoFundMe, the going out and asking the universe. That's a strategy. But I tell you, it's not easy. So we need systems in place for community finance to support our livelihoods. And there could be other services for livelihood support, telling people how to set up cooperatives or different kinds of enterprises. And we might also need access to essential trades, manufacturing services, and skills to enable us to achieve our goals. So, how can communities self-organize to create support structures? And I tell you what, even if you are seeking resources from the outside, asking the universe, hey world, give me some money, please, to buy a wheelbarrow, to buy some seeds. Maybe we could speak more loudly with a collective voice. How do we collaborate together as different cooperative communities to compete for resources, to bid for resources, to create our own livelihood support services? It's worth thinking about. In some ways, within TAPAT, and with the local groups, you're establishing a platform where people can discuss what their needs are and where we can actually set up support groups that exist to support that function. Remember, we're advised in this activity to be having a minimum of 40 people in each group. And within that, we can assign people to support these functions and to research and explore them. Livelihood support services. I think we all need to think about that and have strategies in place where we can learn and build and create models that we can be inspired from. Look, we're in a different world now with the internet and digital currencies and possibilities of creating local currencies and I don't know, trading in different ways. Let's get creative. I don't know the answer, but I can see that you have to focus on each of these areas and explore what your opportunities are. Information systems is number 4. And I think this actually links in a bit with number 3, but is how can we win support? How can we gain momentum to our projects? How can we win resources? By having good media and communications, by telling the story. Remember principle 2, catch and store energy. Okay, catch and store energy, and then to create yields, we can tell our stories. Some of the stories that I'm hearing through the members here are really inspirational. I was sent a lovely video from Kakuma today of what they're doing there in the refugee settlement. I'm hearing from Deborah every week. I'm hearing from you, Simon, can we tell these stories? Do you have a local radio station? Is there a local radio station that you can present some of this information to? Tell them about your successes and your challenges. We've got Facebook, we've got social media, but don't forget, the old school regional newspapers and online bulletin boards. Any kind of publication is usually hungry for information, for content. And if you've got a good story to tell, how might you tell it? Many of us have smartphones. We have the ability for audio visual capture. We can send information to TV, video, Facebook. I would love to have a video editor function to help put these lectures together and to tell the stories of the work that you're doing. Okay, there's a whole world in the computers and computer resources and scanners and printers and various softwares in which we can both collect and disseminate information, our stories. We can collect libraries and have data dumps for our local region. Let's make books accessible, information accessible. So yeah, information systems, let's think about bioregional groups, that your local groups, people that you interact with, and then also can we connect to international connections? You know, again, using social media by building networks of people like us at Sector 39, joining in fact, with us, helping us tell the story. So, you know, we need systems that support information sharing, media and communications. And you could break each one of those down into a regional radio strategy or so forth. This is talking about community and security. As a community, as a bioregional functional community, together we could look into you know, the security of housing and livestock and crops and other things by having strategies in place. Now, what strategies might you have for protecting housing and livestock? That's for the group responsible for that function to explore, to unpick. What are the challenges in our community? What are the dangers? What are the things that we're concerned about? Community and security. What happens if there's a fire? Do you have a fire plan? Are the volunteers available to do firefighting? Do you do management of the build-up of you know, fire burdening of the landscape, controlled burns? It increasingly, as we move into a climate-charged, climate-energized worlds, we're seeing both fires and floods. So we need to think about the prevention, what happens if it happens, and then how we clean up afterwards. We might need some kind of rescue service, and to underpin our community and security, we need good communications. Again, interesting how some of these things reoccur. In these checklists, if you find yourself saying the same thing again and again and again, oh, we need good communication systems, don't just stop repeating it because you've said it already. Take that as a sign of, we need good communication systems. That's a priority, therefore. If we're worried about people stealing our stuff, if we're worried about fires, if we're worried about floods, if we worry about other kinds of disasters or vulnerabilities, you know, we need to plan for them, and we need to have a communication system to make sure that we can activate our responses as and when are needed. Social inclusion. So this is a function of a successful cooperative community, is you need to induct people, introduction and initiation. Hi, this is who we are. This is what we do. This is how we go about things. We have these support groups. Would you like to join one? So induction, initiation, making people feel welcome and giving them the right information, having systems in place so that they can go through an induction process. I mean, a PDC in its own way is an induction process, but you might have shorter training spans and longer ones. Think tanks. Can you create ways for people to come together and problem solve, to share information, to share concerns, to generate ideas? And again, that's another way of including people into your cooperative community, inviting them in to plan, to design, to discuss their needs, so that they feel that they're being understood and they're being included. We could do expeditions and visits. We could deliberately go and visit interesting sites. Let's go and visit Deborah's house. When we were in Teso this time last year, we all went to visit Deborah and we saw what she was doing, and she got some reinforcement and we got some inspiration, and we learned a bit, and many of the people have told me, of our members and trainees, have said they would like much more chance to visit other people's plots and see more examples and think how mutually supportive that is and how that makes us make new friends, feel new connections. Think of the friendships that we've all experienced that have come about through permaculture. This is how we grow our group, and this is how we become stronger. Another strategy for social inclusion is to have like a work event, a perma blitz. You might have a big task, maybe a lot of stuff needs moving, or I don't know, a lot of trees to plant. Can we create an event out of it? Can we take it into a party, or not a party, but a coming together of people with mutual purpose? You know, cook some lunch, make some cakes, or provide some drinks. How can we involve people in our project work, inspire them, and fulfill the function of social inclusion, so that our cooperative community can grow and then also have the opportunity to replicate. Now, if we're in a position of society breakdown, or we don't have enough money to afford Western medicine, you know, let's have a sense of priority about how we might support the health service function in our community. So the first rule in health is preventative, is stopping it from happening in the first place. The best way to not get malaria is to not be bitten by mosquitoes, and you can achieve that with mosquito nets, wearing long sleeve shirts, using aromatic oils as repellents. What preventative measures can we put in place that address the common ailments? That's our first stop. Don't get ill in the first place. Prevention of accidents and injuries. Don't hurt yourself. A little bit of training, a little bit of planning and organizing, and we can reduce our exposure to unnecessary risks. Sharpen tools properly, put them away properly, have operating systems in place that reduce the likelihood of accidents. One of the commonest area of health complaints is gynecological and birthing support. Just having knowledgeable people in the community who can help with rudimentary essential functions like childbirth, and with a little bit of knowledge can go a long way. We can't do everything. We're not within a community. We might still need to look outside for surgical and hospitalization services. Let's be aware of what's out there, and can we put in place strategies to help meet those health bills? But look how this has an order of priority to it. Is let's try not to get sick in the first place. Let's try not to have accidents. Let's provide services for areas that we know that can be tricky but that can be well managed. We'll be aware of what services are outside for what we can't do within our community. And perhaps the other thing that we could do is we could do some research. What are the things that people die of? Statistically, there'll be records. So if we're in a very high malaria area, we need to know that, or any other particular patterns of morbidity. Always interested in patterns. So if we're seeing a particular cluster of diseases or ailments, we can see those patterns, understand what the threats are, and begin to put strategies in place to address them. Things are changing. Principle 12 is about change, and that the only certainty in life is change. So we need to be aware that there are trends, there's potential threats that might come and go. We know there's this climate problem, energized weather systems, sea level is rising, storms are becoming stronger, droughts are becoming longer, rainfall is becoming heavier. We've got climate change, and it's going to keep getting worse. And Hopefully, we will reach a peak point and then things will stabilize again. But that all depends on people's actions. And whatever we do, it's going to become more exaggerated for quite some years yet as a certainty. We have to think about this. We have to bring this awareness into our planning. Sea level rise, climate change. We need to be very aware of outside threats that might come from other people using chemicals that might cause water pollution or soil pollution, nutrient runoff and drainage. We can put strategies in place to reduce those. We need to have keep an eye out to what problems that might, before they really become big problems, you can anticipate them. We're seeing huge changes in the world. We've just seen big banks in the United States collapse. We had a big banking collapse in 2008. Oil prices are going through the roof. They've started a war in Ukraine. All of these, our UK government has made some big mistakes. Our interest rates have gone up. There are financial threats. Again, we need to build resilience and understand what these are and have some sense of how we might protect ourselves. All of these things have implications for policymakers, people making decisions. At whatever scale they're making their decisions, they need to keep an eye on the future trends and potential threats. See the patterns and design from the patterns to the detail. We need to build climate resilient systems. And in doing that, we will greatly increase our own security and indirectly contribute to slowing down, dampening of the climate effect. Transport. Transport, it's an interesting one. It's when I was studying the sort of peak oil and climate change scenarios, what a lot of the planners in that said, the future is going to be local. The more erratic weather systems there are, the higher the price of energy. Weather events damage roads and bridges. A lot of the infrastructure that we have built, especially in the West, was built for much cooler climates, for cooler temperatures and cooler weather. We had 41 degrees centigrade this summer for a few days, and things just started dying and breaking and roads melting. And we hadn't planned for that. So many challenges coming. So the future is going to be local. And again, if we can meet our needs with local and natural resources, then we don't need money. So we could have draft animals. If we've got an ox cart or a camel cart or I don't know, draft animals, donkeys, that's something that we can maintain with local resources. Can we promote active forms of transport, as in anything but a car? Walking, cycling, other forms of motion, all different forms of kind of human-powered transport, maybe. Draft animals, human-powered transport. Can we float things, boats and barges? That's an opportunity for low friction, low energy transport. If we're having things delivered to our community, can we organize joint or group delivery? Let's get a big truck full and then share it rather than have individual deliveries. There may be all sorts of innovations that we could do around transport. Maybe creating fuel from local resources. There's a community in the Pacific that power their whole economy from coconut oil. They run vehicles on coconut oil, generators on coconut oil, because they have a lot of coconuts. What do you have? Other forms of transport, can we get creative and create new options? zip wires. I don't know, just think out of the box. We need routes and paths and bikeways. Maintaining roads takes a lot of resources, and as soon as there's climate problems or shortages of finance, shortage of external resources, the roads break down, and cars aren't designed to grow on really on anything but a metalled road. So if we are needing to use cars and wanting to use cars, it's more effective to have a minibus or a pickup truck because you can get more people in it. We can share vehicles. We could have local taxi services. In East Africa, you're very, very good at filling up vehicles and never having an empty seat. In the UK, we see a lot of cars with just one person in them. That's a terrible waste of resources. Kampala is drowning in traffic. I don't know what the answer is there, but vehicle sharing, local taxis, active transport, creating different routes and paths, and bikeways might all be part of that solution. The nice one is, and I think this is really underthought about, and I think that there's a huge area of opportunity in the future, and it is to float things in the air. Airships. You know, the Hindenburg, the last operating commercial airship in the 1930s, used to fly from Paris to New York in 20 hours. But you could do it in, comfort, not like on a jet plane where you're all packed in like closely together and strapped into your seat. On an airship, you can get up and walk around. You can make it as big as you like as you're floating it. I think there's a whole new set of options. If you like, the limitations around what we can do are changing, and we need to keep being aware of that and seeing when we can create new opportunities. Imagine solar-powered airships in Africa. I mean, I don't know. We've got a long way from draft animals to something like science fiction, but I think, transport's key, and we need to consider all those areas. The guy, I didn't get his name, but whose lecture I based this presentation on, said he worked in emergency response, and that as an emergency responder, he was also, so he was very interested in being part of future trends and potential threats. Where was the thing about, community and security? He said he would be active in these groups because that was the skills he had. And he was also a carpenter, so he would be part of a building group. So you could see how perhaps members of your community might be part of more than one support group. But each support group needs to be populated by at least one or maybe 2 or 3 people. As an emergency responder, the lecturer said, again, think about this in 4 phases, and I think this is a good design criteria to have as well, is, as we saw in a few of those things, is you need a prevention phase. Let's not have a fire. Let's not have an accident. Let's not catch malaria. We can put systems in place to prevent emergency from happening. As we do that, we reach a phase of preparedness. We've got our preventative systems in place, and we need to now think about what will our response phase be should that problem occur. Should we have the flood, the fire, the accident? And then we move to the recovery phase, and then which is rebuilding, reflecting, learning, and feeding what we think we've learned from that process back into the prevention phase. Oh, we had an accident, we had a fire, we had a flood. What did we learn from that? Someone came and stole our cattle. What did we learn from that? We're going to now add that learning into our prevention phase and feed that into our system so it learns and grows. So okay, I've got another little section to go to, and I'm going to just take a pause, and I would like to hear any thoughts or feedback, please, from the floor. Welcome, Joseph. I saw you joined us there. I hope you managed to pick up the theme. Would anybody like to share any thoughts? If you go first, Gerald, you're quite good at breaking the ice.
Yeah, sure. And it's really interesting as to look at permaculture broadly or beyond gardening. I will keep emphasizing this. And for people to have that broad perspective, we are looking at overall livelihoods in general. That's why now we, spreading as far as health and social care, things like, overall security, because they are part and parcel of our day-to-day livelihood. Yeah, so, and maybe to also go to the point that Steve started off with, we usually the word capital pops up into our conversations as we speak, as we, especially at such times when nearly everyone worldwide is a general economic crisis, everyone is, battling. And it's inevitable to think about money as the driving force behind everything. But then on some of the sessions we'll do, or we'll look at various forms of capital beyond that to reinforce or to ensure even resilience in the cases that one of them fails, which case actually is right now where the financial side of capital is really failing. Banks are closing, inflation is kicking in, and obviously inflation means the currency, whichever currency it is, whether it's the shilling or a pound, is losing value. So to create resilience, that means going for the other forms of capital as a plan B or a backup plan. And we'll look at those social capital, especially, social capital, looking at social capital. Steve mentioned about things like barter trade and, utilizing what is locally available, creating shorter value chains or local value chains. All those are good insulations or shock absorbers in the cases of, the failure of the financial capital or failure in the financial systems. Over to you, Steve. Is anyone else having, a question or an addition? Oh, yes, Simon, you have your hand raised. Please go on.
Yes. I wanted to emphasize more on the food security and production, whereby we as members of permaculture, we really have a feeling that when the post-harvest handling processes are fully managed and controlled, like one here, production, one will go in and say, to me to produce, basically, what is the nature of my soil? How good and how suitable that soil is for me to use for production? Is it a type of soil that will enable me to harvest good yields in a long run or short run? That person again would look into the pest management and disease management control systems. Are all of them fully maintained? And then capital itself to enable the cycling and the use of those resources, more so to bring in the inputs into the farms, and then the resources to be used. And again, climatic factors also, are they favorable and effective to make the productivity or production itself to be fully at a level that we need to support our local communities? And then power, sources of power. For us here in Eastern region and Teso at large, we have got draft power, which is more effective and reliable for some of the farmers, and it is a bit cheaper as compared to the use of the machines, the tractors, and so forth. That also can cause the soil capping and the rest and destroy the life cycle of our soil. So when we go into such production, to me, I look at it as aspect whereby nature itself is our friend. So members should definitely emphasize more on nature as a friend for us. And then harvesting itself has got also very many systems to be followed in traditionally, or should we go in for combined harvesters, which are a bit expensive for some of the farmers and the locals around? And then the drying here, when we are to dry to capture up the market for the commodity, to me, I think it would be better for the process of drying. The commodities should be properly well dried, and the moisture content there should be good, so that a farmer can fetch good amount of money from the market, and the value that product is, it will look very nice. Storage. For us, storage here in Eastern region of Uganda, basically we have got the granaries for storing some of the produce which is produced from the farms and so forth and so forth. Though more people apparently are not emphasizing the use of that thing, the granary, but I got my ancestors when they were using it, and it was so effective, and it could help them to put their things, and they were using local resources for making that granary. They were using local materials like clay soil. They were using like grass, local timber, and they could make it. And their things were put into storage very well, and they were controlling it. For the case of security now, they are in the granary. They were using red paper as a pesticide that will control both human and those other pesticides that attack during the time of storage. So to me, I emphasize more on this aspect of granary. Processing value addition, processing that is adding some value to a commodity. Look at now when we are to produce tomatoes, how are we going to care for that tomatoes? From transportation, from the field to the store, from the store to the machine, from the machine to the market. That transportation system, or where majorly we use the mower from Eastern here. We use a mower whereby we use the draft animals to take it to the market and so forth. So but we are in a view on how to make the processing of that tomatoes in order to make it to have like the ketchup, tomato sauce, and so forth and so forth. And then packaging. Packaging here, we are trying to see ways of, for us here in Tapa, we are organizing ways of reaching to the government to see that the polythene bags that people use for packaging their produces that affect our soil during the time of their disposal. They don't have a proper disposal mechanism of those polythene bags, plasticky materials, bottles, and so forth and so forth. Generally, those materials, when they are misplaced or when they are not disposed well, they tend to spoil up our soil, and then the productivity from the soil will be lower. So it is not so good for that kind of a system. Then marketing here, marketing is it should be a collective or a joint thing. I from Tapa can raise Gerald from Kenya, that Gerald here in Uganda, Tapa has produced this kind of the product in such tons, and Gerald would be in position to say, yes, now members, since we are in group dynamics, majorly I emphasize on group dynamics, such that when I produce something in bulk here in Uganda, Steve Jones would be in position to say, let me see marketing here in UK. It would be better. And then all those other aspects and will be fully managed, and we will at least attain our dream, and then we shall prosper in life. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Simon. That is, really brilliant. A full value chain right from the soil production up to the distribution. Anyone else with any input? And maybe to mention, just as Simon emphasized, it would be really unfair or contradictory for us, to produce so much and then it goes to waste. That's why, post-harvest handling is really key. And to some of the, produce, such as maize, if it's not properly handled, you know how dangerous that can be. You start going into things like poisoning. Anyone ever heard of aflatoxins? Which are resultant of poor post-harvest handling, and they've been actually proven to be, cancer-causing in the process. So as we look at the bigger picture, and also probably to wind it up or to summarize also Simon's, or to chip in a bit of on the marketing, it has been also proven to be efficient if we can establish shorter sort of value chains, which implies if at all you're able to buy local, sell local, or buy local and do your supply within the shortest distance, you're not only saving or creating even better communities, but also reducing on your, what we call the carbon footprints attached to your products. For those in these developed countries, we also have to look at things like, the debts. It's not sell by does not necessarily mean that that is offshore or it has really gone off or totally bad, or best before does not really imply that because an avocado or anything just because it's best before it's expired. That is also one thing that is really causing lots of food wastage. I hope in future we could do a write-up or research on that as one of the contributing factors. We have Carol raising her hand. Over to you, Carol.
Okay, thank you, Gerald. Another thing that we could possibly do, which doesn't require maybe so much capital input, is the use of solar dryers, you know, back in the villages. Because when we produce our vegetables, when we produce practically everything, even our sweet potatoes, and when there is excess, we can value add by solar drying them and storing. And then in seasons when there is not so much production, it means we still have food. And yes, right now the cottage industry is the way to go, because we have found out that so much of these products that are mass produced, usually they put in a lot of chemicals for preservation, and this is causing a lot of concern. Like in Africa, there's so many cases of cancer which are coming about, and we are laying the blame at the doorstep of the processing industries. So right now we are saying that, you should try to consume local, So we think that with the use of solar dryers, we can process our foodstuffs so that we will, we can be able to maintain or manage our food resources properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. That was really on point. Anyone else with any suggestion or any? Oh, Simon, is that a new hand or you need to put it down?
It is a new hand.
Okay, please. Let's keep it a bit brief. Then we revert back to Simon. I mean to Steve. Sorry.
Yeah. Now I wanted to supplement on the method of drying it up or of our produce. Basically on the drying up and the storage. Here in Eastern region, we basically emphasize the use of a crib. A crib, when you store your maize, any produce that you put in a crib can stay for a long period of time that you desire to make it for sale. A crib is another thing which is so conducive for drying up of onions, onions and maize, and even storing it there, because the wind breaks from the outside can keep them also good in a good condition, as well as making the pests not to be in position to reach onto it, because there it is a clean environment and it does not necessarily be attacked easily. That is what I wanted to add on.
Thanks, Simon. It's always, interesting and insightful to have your input and everyone's input. Over to you, Steve.
Oh, I see Deborah has her hand up. Deborah, please.
Oh, Deborah, go on, please.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Steve Jones. Thank you, Gerald. Thank you, Sister Stella. You're lost. So I wanted also to talk about post-harvesting handling. Like when I trained as a permaculture teacher, we had here in Teso, we used to buy taplings, and I got a chance to get a this locally machines from EIFA International, whereby we used to chip cassava. That cassava, when you chip, you dry only for 2 hours. Then you make value addition out of that cassava, whereby we were able to come up with bagia, donut tea. Those are the things I wanted to say. Even on the side of health, in our community here, I used to grow green vegetables, but during the time of COVID-19, I was selected as a VHT for our ward. So I used to visit those people who are COVID-19 positive, and these green vegetables really helped my people, and none of them passed away. And I was even putting them in home isolations, checking on them. So that's what I also wanted to contribute on the side of post-harvesting handling and on the side of health. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening.
Thanks, Deborah. That's really interesting. For those who are not aware of the abbreviation, VHT is the Village Health Team. And those are people at community level, like the community, that would be equivalent of community nurses, however much they are not really trained nurses. So also the other,
pardon me, Gerald.
Oh, okay. It would be interesting if probably from within the team, maybe like Caroline could organize a training on solar drying, because they are local ways of, constructing those simple solar dryers. I've seen someone drying what is locally called dodo and putting it into porridge. Very nutritious. Dodo is amaranth, and they've dried it, put it into powder. What would have been on the shelf for, let's say, 2 days, now can have a shelf life of about a year, because it has been dried and in powder form without necessarily losing the nutrients. Over to you, Steve. Steve?
Oh yeah, sorry, here we go. Of course, we talked about moringa before. Again, another plant that you can dry and really add value to and store and add it. It's an ingredient to support your nutrition. And I think what Deborah was just telling us about her volunteer health visitor role, it really fits into the model that we were talking about, how in our cooperative communities, we have to each, we might contribute in several different areas, but we might each have a way that we can contribute especially. And what Deborah's role as a health visitor was to focus on prevention, and then also strengthening the people so they can fight the disease better by having access to good, nutritious food. So it all comes back to that again. It's the basis of good health is good nutrition and everything that comes around it. So I thank you very much for your examples. I think that really fed into, that really added some depth to what we've been talking about. I'm going to have some summary thoughts, because we're thinking about design. We're thinking about how we create change in the world, how to approach design. And we're reaching the end of Principle 7, which is one I find very interesting to think about. And it's this idea of moving from overarching patterns to detail. And remember, we looked at fractal patterns and different kinds of patterning last week. shows that there can be patterns within patterns within patterns, worlds within worlds within worlds. So as we move in from a big picture, we certainly zoom in on to, you know, find the details. And also we've now had some thoughts about how we might approach design. Let's think about some of the things that we've said. So here's our summary is, well, we said, remember, principle one, it all begins with observation, asking questions, interrogating, looking at the landscape, what you were talking about, Simon, you know, is this the right kind of soil for the kind of crops I want to get? And, you know, asking those fundamental questions. Now, last week, I gave you a design model, and I'm going to ask you to try to use that in the activity that we're going to start working on. And that design model had an acronym, a made-up word to help us remember it, and that is SADIMET. Doesn't mean anything, but it's just to help us remember a sequence. SADIMET stands for survey. We begin with asking questions, observing what is the land, what are our objectives, why are we doing this, what is the function we want to fulfill. We talked about how we're going to interrogate the client. Who are we doing this for? We're going to interrogate the land. You know, what resources do we have? We're going to look for leaks, erosion, waste, and we're going to speak to the people around who have knowledge and experience to inform our design. So survey, analysis, design, implementation and maintenance, evaluation and tweaking. So we don't jump and have fixed ideas about design. We begin by asking fundamental questions. Why are we doing this? What resources do we have? What's our time limit? What are our values? These are the things we talked about last week. Okay, so we start to think about our design. We think about our and the next step then is to communicate our intentions. We need to test our ideas on our clients and get some feedback. Hey, we could give a broad brush of stroke about our basic assumptions, and to check that's, you know, we're understanding it right, and we test that by asking for feedback. So then, again, in our sense of strategy priority, we're going to establish essential systems. We're going to build the systems that are going to create the resources that we need. Establish the systems that are going to catch and store energy, create compost, grow materials for mulch, for shade. We've got to build the system. So we're going to interact with our client group and communicate our intentions. We're going to start establishing our systems. And in doing that, we're going to make visible changes. And I think it's really important at the beginning of our design processes for people to notice that you're doing something, and that will generate interest and draw people in. Hey, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? That, you know, and that's your method, that's your way in of building your team. So, and then think about our cooperative community development model that we've talked about is, as you start to implement your design, as people start to ask questions, you can find ways to reach out and involve them. Hey, we've got a meeting tonight, or we're thinking about this, or perhaps you'd like to take part in that. Those are our priorities. And I've given you these models and things to follow as like a checklist. And understand that there's a right order of doing things, and a priority, a sort of a hierarchy about how we make our decisions. And I don't know whether you can see this picture very well. This is a photograph from Google Earth, and this is a rural, remote hospital complex. This is in eastern Uganda, in Teso region. And some of us went to visit this site a year ago to talk to the people at the hospital about whether they might want to incorporate permaculture into their methodology. So this farm was established in it's a hospital. It was established in the 1920s by a Dutch, I don't know, company, mission, not quite sure, to treat people with leprosy. So it's in a remote area because leprosy is contagious. And their idea back in the 1920s, 1930s, was to build a farm around the hospital, a dairy farm, because that's what they do a lot of in Holland, and to supply milk and cheese and dairy products for the patients to improve their nutrition, and obviously to create a surplus that could be sold locally and generate some income streams, revenue streams for the hospital. So I think in the 1950s and 1960s, they did well. They had like 1,000 cows, or I don't know, a significant herd. And over time, because they haven't used organic methods, because they haven't followed permaculture, the land has become very compacted and dry, and they've tried solving the problems with more pesticides, different kinds of grasses, fertilizers, I don't know. And a year ago, we began a conversation with them about bringing permaculture into their system and how we might go about it. And what I said to them was, this isn't something that happens overnight, and you need a long-term buy-in to the ethics and principles of permaculture. This will take a few years. Think 3, 4, 5 years, but then you'd start to see significant changes. And the way that we might approach it would be exactly using the methodologies that we're talking about. Is we need to understand the requirements of these people in the zone 1 area, in the focus of it, in the hospital. What are their needs? What are their values? What are their long-term goals? And if the land has become degraded, we need to start a process that's going to regenerate it. Permaculture design says, start from the back door, start locally, work out from established areas. So if there's potentially a huge area of farmland around those buildings, but to try and attempt to change all of that at once would be, you need a lot of money, you need a lot of resources, and maybe you make a mistake, it might not quite work, and then you've created a terrible mess. So the lesson is, we're going to start small, we're going to work closely with the clients, and we're going to use that checklist to start to build our support groups. And we're going to identify, the first thing we're going to build is some compost heaps and some water catchment, and build a nursery and start to propagate the plants that we'll know we'll need as we move into our design. So I'm going to use this as an example, and perhaps something we could collaborate on to think about. This is just a notional thing, but this might happen. Is, let's just say we have the chance to build a dialogue with these people, to create something, a demonstration area, to start a process in which we could transform this whole area. So I'm super excited by this. I'm just trying to think of how to bring it into our learning and our teaching. And I think that as an academy of permaculture, I want to create ways in which we can, obviously gain experience, learn, create working models at different scales and different sizes. And this would be an ambitious project, but it could be an interesting collaboration, a long-term collaboration between Sector 39 and the hospital, and then to think about how you, as students, learners, teachers, mentors, how you might be able to learn from this, contribute to this, be part of it, use it as we move from patterns to detail. You might get involved in some of the details. You might help us become part of our cooperative community that's going to manage this project over the next 5 years. So pushing it out there is a little bit of an invite. It's a little bit premature because literally only just started talking to the people in more detail. But I want to give you a real example, and I want us to think about how, what we do in our homes, what we do in our home compound, what we do in our home community might give us lessons, insights, inspirations to help us join together to create bigger changes, and which can actually create models that might have a greater and further impact. So the fact that this hospital and farm is part of a Dutch enterprise links it to people from around the other parts of the world might be paying attention. It'll have a local impact, and then think about how it might have a regional impact. So we've got something there to begin to think about that's really real, and that we might be able to contribute to shaping and developing a permaculture design that will start small, but can organically grow to transform what we're looking at here as a big farming area and a surrounding community. So I just thought I'd bring that in as a final thought. We've still got 20 minutes actually, so let's hear a little bit from you. Andre, I just noticed that you just tuned in, and you're very welcome. And you're there at Kakuma. We've been talking to people from Kakuma, from Nachivali. We're hearing from other places as well. And we're really aware how I think permaculture can provide very useful tools, organization. And I've seen you already have some gardens there. You're already doing some great work. You've had some training, I think, within your community. Please, anything you'd like to share, say hello to the group and tell us your experiences of permaculture there in Kakuma.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Steve, for giving me that opportunity. Yeah, I'm Andre Lutula from Kakuma Refugee Camp. I'm Congolese by nationality. Yes, we are here to help our community, our colleague refugees, by teaching them how they can cultivate their own garden so maybe they can survive. Because here in Kakuma, we have so many challenges about food. We have food insecurity. So we try our best to teach them how they can help themselves. So about permaculture, we are trying our best. We just train them about permaculture, PDC. So we can say thanks for be part of you in this group, in the wonderful group. Maybe we can learn more about permaculture with you, and we will help our community, because here the refugees are vulnerable. That's why our community-based organization called Social Action Center for Vulnerable Individuals. We want to create a center, but we have some challenges, but we just started that's a community-based organization. Thank you for Haza member in the group. We shall communicate, we will talk more, but it is my first time to join, to be part of you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Andre. And there's a thought that I keep having. So principle 6 in permaculture is produce no waste. Also, when we talk about our Sadimet process, when we observe, we begin a design, we say, look for the leaks. Where are the wasted resources? Because those are unused assets. And I look to refugee settlements displaced people, and I see, people who haven't been engaged. They're not, all the challenges there is there's a human resource there to be tapped into. So very much what we've been talking about this evening, Andre, is very, very relevant to your situation. Is how do we begin to organize people to be effective, to become a cooperative community? And we've talked about, you kind of need a group from about 40 to 600, and you need to look at different areas, beginning with food and food security, but then setting up systems around that support the development of your food and food security, and then moving on to think about other things as well. And in the lecture we've identified 9 different areas, food and food security being really important, and then I think it was buildings and energy, wasn't it? And then the third one we went on, or whatever it was. So I'm thinking a lot about how to connect with, how to understand the challenges that you're facing, understand what resources and opportunities you do have, and then think about how we could help you guys organize yourselves into cooperative structures with strategic aims in mind. Now, I'm sure you're already doing that, but as you said, we could always learn more. And as we do these things, we learn. And we're trying to create this academy, Andre, so that we can be teachers, mentors, and students to each other, because we all have things we can teach each other. We all have different, knowledges and specialties. And and I'm telling you, my friend, there's going to be a lot more people displaced and to a refugee status of some kind because of climate change, because of resource depletion, because of conflict, and many other things. So as you are experiencing life in Kakuma, you can become a teacher who can help future waves of displaced people.
Yes.
So there's, I can see, I'm not in any way the challenging situations that people are in, but that you can move through that. We spent some time teaching up in West Nile in 2018 in some very big settlements of South Sudanese people. And you could see the places where people had arrived, they'd been there some weeks or months, and then the next settlement, they'd been there a year or two, and another settlement, they'd been there 3 or 4 years. And you could see the succession and how, with putting good systems in place, life can continually improve. So I really hope we can help you achieve that in your community.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, any summary or closing thoughts from, firstly from Gerald, and then anyone else who would like to chip in?
Yes, it's good to see you, Andre.
Yes.
As Steve said, we relate, or our work connects so much with internally or externally displaced people.
Yes.
And then it was, one of the areas that where one of the projects we did lots and lots of learning. And as part of our work into the academy, the people in settlements, we don't usually refer to them as incomes, we call them settlements, are going to form a key aspect of it, because we realize there is far much potential, and then they is where also much of the livelihood and the work we're doing is really beyond needed. It's really needed. We've also worked with a smaller group before with another colleague of ours called Angie, and I don't know how big Kakuma is, but it's a group that is headed by Lundo. So it would be good to see how to create that integration and keep linking up. They are doing work around also permaculture and livelihoods, especially for women and children. but still with
Yeah.
Kakuma. I understand Kakuma is also big. So you never know. As time goes on, we could connect you with them, but then also but then we also appreciate the fact that you become a part of the team. Keep coming, then you have our support, and then keep supporting you, especially in terms of capacity building, and as we go on.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Steve. Anyone? Yeah, yes, Andre.
Thank you, Brother Gerald, for meeting with you. And I'm very happy to be part of you. I know you know what we want to create in our communities is to implement those different activities. Maybe we can help our community by teaching them different things, because here in Kakuma there is so many challenges, brother. I can tell you. I wish you maybe one day you can come and visit Kakuma. Maybe it can be very important to us to meet and to learn, to teach each other. Maybe it can help even our community, because we have in our community-based organization, we have different activities. One of them we have permaculture, we have women empowerment. In women empowerment, we are doing merry-go-round. So we are collecting a little of money, and we give for someone. Maybe she can support herself. So we have also leadership and the conflict resolution, whereby we are helping our community. We just do ourselves to teach each other whatever they can. Maybe they can survive in peaceful. We have also children welfare. So we have so many activities, but challenges. We have so many challenges in terms of training. When we have trainings, tools, equipment, maybe refreshment. So, but we are in the group. We will share ideas. We will learn it from each other. Maybe support. We can even support each other's. Thank you for all members in the group. Yeah.
Thank you, Andre. And yes, you're at the very root of it all. Community resilience, things like cooperative, what you're calling merry-go-round, is key. That's part of the resilience, building structures, and also conflict resolution is really key. So that is already the broader picture of it. It's good to have you around, and please keep coming. We look forward to more interactions. Do we have any other additions or questions before Steve comes in to wind it up, to wind today's session up?
Yeah, what I can say is, we meet in the group. And some of us, we don't know what we can do in the future, but like we are here, we can teach each other, like permaculture. We have also different things that any member can learn from one of us. So mine is thanks for all, and we shall talk more. We shall communicate more. Thank you.
Thanks, Andre. And as we always say, it's not trivializing the problem, but then our belief And our key area of our key principle is the problem is the solution. Behind each and every problem, when you invert it, you have the solution. Thanks, Andre. Back to you, Steve.
Yeah, so just kind of use that time up. I thank you everyone for your contributions this week, whether it's in the chat or speaking live. Reminder that this is recorded and posted on the Sector 39 website, and there's also a Sector 39 YouTube channel. And we have a Facebook page as well. You'll find us. So it's there. We're trying to build a resource that people can come and access and come back to. And also the slideshows that I'm showing, I also put on the site so you can download it. We want to make this information available to everyone. And we want to actually create an ongoing dialogue. I sort of feel that this process doesn't end. We need to, because we're always learning and we're always facing new challenges and hopefully building our own cooperative support network through our academy, so we can, make permaculture available to everyone. So there we go. That's it for this week. You're welcome to get in touch with me in between, and otherwise I shall see you same time next week. And a reminder that it's now 6:30 East African time that we start. It was 7:30. It's now 6:30, and that's because the UK time changed. We have a summertime thing. Asante sana.
Asante.
Thank you,
Karibu.
Sana nawe lambda.
Good night. Nosta.
Bye. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Your numbers.
Yala Manoy.
Yala Mano, Gerald.
Bye. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yala Mano, Caroline.
Just send me your
Bye.
numbers. Please send me your numbers, your contact. Maybe we can talk on WhatsApp.